Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Nate Eaton. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. It is June 1st, 2025, coming to you from Phoenix, Arizona, where I have some breaking news to report tonight, just for you. And those of you that live here might think I'm crazy, but I woke up this morning and it was cloudy. The sun was not up. I went on a walk and it was drizzly. Raining. In fact, I took some video. You can see here it's cloudy. I don't know if you can actually see the raindrops in this shot, but then the great news is the Teton Toyota car that they are graciously letting me use here in Arizona, it got a car wash thanks to Mother Nature. And here's the pool outside of my hotel room that you can see, just to prove to you that it does rain in Arizona. I did check with some of you and some people that live here, and they said it rains occasionally, and anytime it does, they're so grateful. But it really cooled things off today. It was a great way to end the weekend with a nice, cool, rainy Sunday. Perfect day to stay inside and do whatever you have to do. And we need some cool weather because it's probably going to get hot this week in the courtroom. How was that transition? By the way, let us know where you're watching from tonight. And if you have any questions, I'll get to your questions at the end. Here's what we're talking about. Lori's third trial, supposed to begin tomorrow. Will it? Will she be better? She went home sick on Friday, as did the entire jury. Well, they weren't sick. They were sent home because Lori was sick herself. And we're going to talk about that today. Also, I realized this morning, 1 year ago today, Chad Daybell was sentenced to death. I can't believe it's been a year. But it was 1 year ago today. Jury selection, we're going to talk about that. It should continue tomorrow. It's on the docket to continue tomorrow. Who will testify in Lori's trial? Many of you have written and asked that question. I've got the list. We'll go through it. Also, Special Prosecutor Rachel Smith is here answering many questions you all have, along with questions I have. And I reached out, and Laura, juror number 4 in Lori's Idaho trial, will be here to share her thoughts about the jury selection and whatnot. And then, of course, we will answer your questions. So I actually was reminded on my Facebook memories today that the Chad Daybell sentence came back a year ago today. I'll never forget that day. I don't know if you remember where you were. Of course, we found out Chad Daybell was guilty on a Thursday, and then the actual sentence for death came down on Saturday because they went straight into what's called the mitigation aggravation phase, where people can take the stand to argue that he should get death. So Tammy Daybell's siblings all spoke. Her father spoke. Chad Daybell did not put on any mitigation. He could have had his kids speak or others on his behalf. He could have spoken. He did not. Nothing. Here are the photos that were taken that day. This was right before and right as he learned that he would be dying in prison. Well, actually, his life would be taken in prison, I should say. There's a special death penalty room building out at the Idaho prison in Kuna, outside of Boise, where executions take place. And I went out to the prison. I won't show you it tonight, but I have a full report on our YouTube channel. They're actually redoing that facility, and executions are put on hold because the Idaho legislature just passed a law where the firing squad is legal and will be the way that prisoners are executed versus the lethal injection, which they tried to execute Creech last year in Idaho, and they could not get a vein. So it's on hold right now while they make modifications to this facility so that they can carry out executions with the firing squad. It is very well likely that Chad Daybell will die by firing squad when that day comes. The big question is, when will that day come? It won't be for some time. I'll have more gray hair, as will probably all of us watching, because he probably won't be executed for many, many years. But that was 1 year ago today. And the timing in all of this is so interesting because these cases have happened every spring. And if you think about it, JJ and Tylee were found on June 9th of 2020. So in 8 days from now, and we will be in trial. And that very well could be potentially the date that the state rests in this case. That's when they were originally planned to rest in this case. But with the issue with Lori's health, we'll see. And let's transition into that right now. So tomorrow, jury selection is anticipated to continue in the morning at 10:30. The 54 jurors who were asked to come back tomorrow will come back to the courthouse, assuming Lori Vallow Daybell is better. She said she was not feeling well on Friday. Everybody was sent home. And if she is sick tomorrow, then there will be no court. We probably won't know until tomorrow. But if she's better and the trial can continue, then the jury will be picked in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we will likely have opening statements from both the prosecution and the defense. The schedule will be such, give or take, 10:30 to noon. And then it's possible maybe that the jury is picked by noon, and then there's a 90-minute lunch break. And then after the jury is read their instructions, which will take some time, it could take an hour or so. There's many, many pages. In fact, jury selection will likely continue into the afternoon. But regardless, then there'll be an afternoon recess, and then opening arguments, opening statements could take place, and then potentially maybe the first witness. Now, that's if everything goes as planned. It is possible that tomorrow is just jury selection and that the next day they do opening statements first thing Tuesday morning. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Either way, I'll be there and I'll be posting updates across all of our platforms so you can keep up to date. Once the opening statements are done, then the state will present its case. And they have submitted a list of 22 witnesses that they say, and they put this in bold, will either testify or be referred to. So it sounds to me that they do not plan to call all of these people, but all of these people we will either hear from or they will reference in the case. Here's who we're talking about. Gilbert Police, we've got Jason Biggs, David Ferrer, Tammy Latchchick, Nolan McDermott, Ryan Pillar, Marianne Robb, Patrick Young. A lot of these are officers, detectives, investigators, things of that nature. From the Chandler Police Department, we have Nathan Duncan. He was the case agent on the previous trial. He was in court every day. He testified. From the Mesa Police, we have Vanessa Milkey, Lisa Perry, Emmy Lynn Sapinoso. From Phoenix Police, we have Kyle Mueller. From the Department of Public Safety, we have Thomas M. Olsak. From the Drug Enforcement Agency, we have Thomas D. Miller. From the Rexburg Police, we have Ray Hermosillo. From the FBI, we have Nicholas Balance. We've heard from both of those gentlemen before. And then the civilians who will testify, Robert Abitamarco, Brandon Boudreau, of course, the victim, Elizabeth Jane Collins, Timothy Zane Deloach, Lynette Mendoza, and Dan Moss. The way that the prosecutor has explained it is that she will get through all of her witnesses except 3 by Thursday. Now, of course, with the sickness, that could change the schedule. Originally, the plan was to get through all of the witnesses by Thursday. Court would be dark on Friday. On Monday, the remaining 3 witnesses would testify, and then the case would be turned over to the defense. The defense could then take the rest of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever, or if Lori does what she's done in the past and she rests, it's possible there could be closing arguments next Tuesday, and we have a verdict Tuesday or Wednesday. Just maybe. But the all indications from our Judge Bareski, and from others involved in the case is that this case will be wrapped up by, for sure, end of next week. So there is your witness list. All right. If you have any questions, where's Lori's witness list? You're asking. We don't know. Well, her filing for Charles's case, she said that it pertained to both cases, that list, which I won't even go through because none of those people testified in that first case, and some of them were precluded, including yours truly. But the other list, if she filed it late. So we don't know who she plans to call. There's been some discussion in court that she planned to call Melanie Gibb and Zulema Pastenis, and an expert or 2. But again, it was late when it was filed. So we'll see. We'll see if that happens. And then the big question is, of course, will she testify? She could. That's her case. So there's what we have as far as looking ahead. Now, this is a big evening, if you think about it, for the prosecutors, assuming that things go off as planned tomorrow. It's like the night before a final you could think about, or the night before you have a big presentation at work. But also think about if you have a big presentation tomorrow at work and the world's watching and you have cameras on you and they're going to evaluate your every move and your every word and what you're wearing and everything like that. Your hair, especially if you're female. If you're female, you get that times 10. But I wanted to talk to Rachel Smith. She's the special prosecutor in Lori Vallow's first case in Idaho. She also has done hundreds of cases with homicides, with death penalty. She's done opening statements. She's done closing arguments. She's cross-examined witnesses. She's had a variety of cases in multiple states. And I wanted to talk with her tonight to discuss what we can anticipate in this case, and also why they're even, the question many of you have asked, why are they even prosecuting this particular case when Lori's already been found guilty? We'll talk about that. Along with her, we start with the fact that with the item about Lori being sick. Okay, Rachel, the first thing I wanted to ask you was what you thought about Lori being sick and the jurors all having to go home yesterday.
The judge made the right call. If you have a defendant, especially somebody pro se, or as they call it in Arizona, pro per, he's got to make sure she's well. And if she's genuinely sick, that is a reason to delay a day, delay a half day, even delay the trial. I tried a capital murder case here, and we were day two of like what was going to be a 2-week trial. We'd spent 3 or 4 days picking a jury, and I got the flu. I just couldn't even think. And so the judge, I went up to the judge after the morning. He could tell I was off. And I said, Judge, I need a half day. And everybody went home, and the jurors who were sequestered went back to their hotel. And so it happens in the court, by and large, with people who are credible. And while Lori may not necessarily have the highest credibility with what she says, she's been at every court appearance. She's always there. She hasn't given the court difficulty in that area. So it doesn't surprise me that the court took her at her word, wants her at the best of her game, and is giving her some time to either get well or get medicine.
Now, what would happen if a defendant continually said, I'm sick, I have a cold, and the judge knew that maybe they weren't telling the truth, they just wanted to get out of it or extend things out?
Somebody who has a pattern of conduct like that, which that stuff does happen, in most places, what will happen is the court will make a record of that pattern of attendance, give them a warning. Sometimes there's even a warning that they give by case law. It'll be written into the case law, like your attendance, your courtroom decorum, your behavior in the courtroom shapes your participation. And your failure to participate within the rules, you can go so far as to waive your right to appearance. You'll hear the judge make a record. You'll hear them talk about it. They'll give them every benefit of the doubt, but there is a point at which a judge can make that call to go without them, to make them sit there. And there are some even extreme examples where they can take other measures. So there are tools a judge has when somebody is abusing the system to ensure their appearance or to make a really solid record that they've waived their appearance. My personal belief is Lori Vallow is nowhere near that. She's done nothing but advocate, albeit not particularly well for herself. I don't think this is a situation where Lori is trying to get out of her trial. She likes the attention too much, but the judge has tools if he wants them.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, there could be a trial where the defendant doesn't come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That trial in absentia, most places the court will have a process and a record they'll build, and it'll be a very public record where the judge will make a series of findings saying that the person, by either their behavior in the courtroom, their behavior out of the courtroom, or God forbid they take off mid-trial, that they've waived their appearance and they're going to go ahead. I'm getting ready to try a case where I am filing a motion for courtroom decorum, where if somebody's behavior in the courtroom is so extreme that they will essentially have either waived their right to appearance or the court can take more extreme measures. And so it is not typical, but it's not unheard of that the court will rule on some of those motions. Where I practice, in the places I practice, it's called motion for courtroom decorum, or motion to try the person in absentia or to bind and gag them. Um, those are the binding gag is very rare, but the court has a lot of tools. But you would have heard a lot of records coming out of the judge for Lori Vallow, and he would have been very, very clear over a period of time that she was treading on thin ground. None of that's happened here for Lori.
Let's talk about some of the recent hearings with Lori Daybell. She has definitely become more vocal and more argumentative, you could say, with the judge. And many of our commenters are saying, why can't the judge restrain her, or she's speaking inappropriately? What tools does a judge have if a defendant repeatedly interrupts, doesn't let them speak, has behavioral type issues?
Judges have a lot of tools. They're very cautious and careful in using them because that's one of the areas that's looked at really tightly by appellate courts. And you can see this judge is very conservative. He's very careful. So that he has a tool of making her sit in another room and watch by camera. He can cut her off. He can set a timer by which she's allowed, this is the amount of time you have. And when that clock is done, you're done. He can admonish her. He can tell her he's going to admonish her in front of the jury and what that impact could have on her credibility in front of the jury. That if he sees her actions as an effort to intimidate a witness, to intimidate the victim, to inappropriately sway the jury, that he can take steps to have her only be in another room and appear via television. He can order her to be in a cell and only come back periodically when she's been offered the opportunity to behave herself. I will tell you, while she is interrupting a lot, none of her behavior, while inappropriate, I don't think she's anywhere near that yet.
Mhm.
It's probably frustrating to the people who have followed Lori for years, but her behavior is analogous to what I see some attorneys who are not particularly seasoned or who are kind of chasing headlines, candidly.
Yeah.
They'll do that. They'll interrupt the judge. They'll get really combative, and that's what shows up in whatever news coverage, whatever footage there is, because that's what's unusual. So the judge has a lot of tools. He can limit her time. He can remove her and have her watch from another room. He can cut her off and warn her that he's going to admonish her in front of the jury and what impacts that can have. He can say she no longer can speak on her own behalf because her presence, she has waived that and she has a right to counsel. So the judge has lots of options. Nowhere near that, no matter how frustrating yet, I don't think. I don't even know as a prosecutor I'd ask for that. I think the other thing you may see is if the prosecutor becomes concerned that this is a tactic to intimidate a witness or to sway the jury inappropriately, you'll see some motions out of the prosecutor. Were I sitting at the table right now, I wouldn't yet file that. I might raise the red flag with the judge, but I wouldn't have filed the motion yet.
Well, and it seems like the judge maybe is starting to take those baby steps. Yesterday, there were some outstanding motions that the prosecutor brought up to discuss, and he said, I'm going to issue written orders given on what happened the day before.
Yeah.
So instead of arguing it there and letting another can open up, he says, no, I'm just going to issue it. And he handed them written copies, and that was that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lori was given an opportunity to written responses. So you see sort of, it's almost like an incremental discipline, right? You see it transition from everybody getting to have their say to limiting your time to talk to written only. So you're seeing some baby steps on the judge controlling his courtroom.
I want to talk about the role of her advisory attorneys. And uh, are they there to, well, what is their role? What is their role? Is it up to her?
It's 100% up to her. She's lead counsel. Um, I think a good analogy would be the team you saw in Idaho, right? For Lori's case, in the end, the ultimate decider was Rob Wood. And then everybody else got a say, and you had a role, you had responsibilities, but in the end, the call went to Rob, who is very collaborative and worked really well on Lori's case with Lindsay. And they made joint decisions, but in the end, that was going to be Rob's call. So it's an analogous that Lori is taking everybody's opinion, taking everybody's advice and making a decision and moving forward. You'll see her pause and talk to counsel. Candidly, you should be seeing it a lot more, but she is in the lead counsel role. So they give advice, they make suggestions. She either takes it or leaves it and moves on.
What happens if they don't like her or get tired of her? Is it one of those things that professionally you just stick with it? Or could there come to a point like her previous defense counsel, they all declared a conflict of interest and were out? And I don't know the reasoning behind that. I don't want to insinuate that they didn't like her, but there was something. So is it kind of those things you put that aside and you're just there to assist?
It is really that simple concept that you're there to assist. In the end, that's the client's case. In the end, it's the client's life. They make the ultimate decision. So, in the advisory role, they give their best opinion, whether or not they like her. In fact, if many of my colleagues are publicly candid, they often don't like their client, especially when their client has done something that is particularly heinous or awful, but they very firmly believe in the system. They very firmly believe that their job is to hold the government accountable and that their job is to protect people's rights. So it doesn't matter if you like the person, if you believe in the principle of protecting people's rights, your personal feelings about someone you put aside. And I suspect whether or not they like lawyer or not is kind of irrelevant.
Mm.
Most seasoned defense attorneys will be candid. They have had clients they personally did not like, maybe even really fundamentally disliked. Um, but their job is protect the rights, hold the government to its burden, require the government to follow the process outlined by our Constitution to take someone's freedom away. And viewed that way, your personal feelings become irrelevant. So with an assist case, it's even more so because you're not even the one having to talk.
Mhm.
All you do is give your best advice, you give it out, and if she doesn't do it, that's on her. I suspect previous counsel to go for a conflict of interest, it has nothing to do with liking the person. It means that there is something so personally broken down that you cannot even give, she will not even hear or receive your advice in a way to make an informed choice. Um, I don't believe it's this case, but I've had other cases where the defendant has actually threatened their lawyer,
Mm.
right? That's a different, you don't have to put yourself at risk. So,
Could it have
so
been the fact that her previous defense counsel wanted a continuance and basically said, we don't have enough time to go through all this evidence, and she was adamant that there not be a continuance? Could that raise to the level of, we vehemently disagree here and there is a conflict?
yes, and so that's the concept of you're going to be ineffective, right? If your relationship is so broken down that you cannot effectively advise or advocate, then you get off the case.
Yeah.
So I suspect it's a situation where they believe they didn't have the adequate time to even effectively give her advice. And that's, you cannot be ineffective. And that can be a personal choice or subjective standard. But for the seasoned attorneys she's had, it really rose to a level of like, look, Judge, we're going to do a bad job. And for whatever reason, us doing a bad job could affect the outcome, and we need off.
Tell me how this case is going to be different than Charles, whereas Brandon is alive. There was no murder, but there was a conspiracy to commit it. Are things different at all in the way that things will play out at trial?
Things are much different. there's going to have to be a lot more connecting of the dots for the conspiracy piece, for the underlying motivation for Lori and beyond. You don't technically have to prove motive, but motive is extremely important to helping the jury see the true story of what happened. So you're going to have to connect the dots on motive. Then you're going to have to connect the dots that she conspired or contributed to Alex's actions. So you're going to see a very different case. We had some Lori was physically there. The fight started with Lori with regard to Charles. So you have some physical activity by Lori directly involving Charles that's a little more attenuated in Brandon, in addition to the things you talked about. So I think the tire roll at the storage facility is particularly important.
Do you think they'll play that footage? That's what I get asked a lot because they didn't in Idaho.
Yeah, I think it depends on foundationally whether they have the right witnesses. Because you don't get to just play video, you got to have the right foundation. You got to have the witness who's willing and able to get in there and testify. And you also feel like you have to need it. Sometimes prosecutors will choose not to put things in because it opens the door. If it could deflect blame to the state's detriment on another co-conspirator and make them look like the primary actor, sometimes prosecutors choose not to use evidence. If the prosecution has the foundation, I don't think there's some of the risks for Arizona that there might have been in Idaho, where they're going to blame Chad and absolve Lori because Chad's not charged. So I think they're going to keep it really focused on Lori, and that may be something they need for Brandon's case that wasn't needed in Idaho, because we didn't try her for what she did to Brandon.
Yeah, it's true. And
Right.
I guess you could argue by showing that video, well, she was there actually with
Yeah.
Chad. She
Yeah.
was there. So if it was
Yeah.
just Chad or Alex going in, you're saying that they might not want to show it because the jurors could say, well, where's Lori? She's not there.
Right. But there's absolutely in this case, she wasn't charged in Idaho for what she'd done to Brandon. That was evidence of other crimes to support the charges we had. And injecting sort of the role that Chad and Lori both played in that video may not have been it was a choice. We chose not to go down that path.
Mm.
We were really focused on the culpability of each individual actor, and to the extent evidence could minimize their role and blame on one of the other actors, sometimes we chose not to use stuff. The defense certainly could have if they wanted to go there, but we chose to keep it really straight and clean and focused on what Lori did. And since she was not charged in Idaho directly with what Brandon did, we were given enough evidence to get that in to show part of the overall conspiracy. We didn't need to go further. The case in Arizona is different. She's on the line for what she did to Brandon. And so that video probably will have way more relevance if
So
they can lay the right foundation.
if this were your case, would you start with your first witness as Brandon?
Yes, I absolutely would. But different prosecutors try different things. I try a case where, any case where I want the jury to see the big picture as quickly as possible. Because then when I bring in the step by step, this evidence, they have a big picture. It's kind of like when those people who do the frame of a puzzle first,
Mhm.
then you fill in the blanks.
Right.
I am a frame of the puzzle. Some people like to make sure their foundations are clear. So they'll start with the investigator and then they'll build the
So,
evidence and then they'll end with big picture. You could get that lawyers get into debates about that all the time. But
right. Well, I wonder
I,
if they did
I,
start with him and then he's in the courtroom every day with his wife.
mhm.
And the jurors see him every day with his wife. And I don't know, they probably won't bring their kids, but I'm just saying, does that help the prosecutor by having this witness there in front of them daily to look at this young, handsome dad with a beautiful wife and how his life could have been lost?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It reminds the jury of who could have been taken and who was harmed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question that so many people ask is why are they even holding this trial?
Oh.
Doesn't matter. She's going to go
Uh,
back to Idaho. What's your response when people say that to you?
the justice system has to be about more than just what sentence someone gets, right? If we want a system to reflect potential harm done to someone or actual harm done to someone, then you hold Brandon's trial. It, justice isn't about a number of years. Justice isn't necessarily about a sentence. Justice is about accountability and the person who was harmed having a say. And I applaud Maricopa for not listening to the naysayers. Um, on a case like this, with somebody like Lori Vallow, like Chad Daybell, um, you have to see it as justice for people, not just a balance sheet.
Good answer. Very good, Rachel. Anything that you want to add?
No, I'll be very interested. Like I'm trying a case for a couple of days at the beginning of this week, but I'm very interested to see once I'm out how things unfold and if Lori continues to be more assertive. Um, I would be very interested to see if her sickness, extends. The judge, I understand, did say something about does she have to quarantine,
Yeah.
which makes me wonder what's going on in the jail. Is there some COVID running around? Um, and so, because if she's still sick, she may choose to have counsel step up, which will be interesting.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting because that changes the game. I don't know if personally I foresee Lori doing that about having her attorneys take over, but it's possible. My thanks to Rachel Smith for always being willing to chat with us, and we'll likely have her on again. So if you have any questions, please send them in, put them in the comments, and we'll try to get those to her. Now, transitioning from that interview to another person who played a pivotal role in Lori's first case in Idaho. Laura, juror number 4. This is a young mother who I recall very vividly sitting on the front row, 4 seats over. Every day during the trial, she watched this evidence and she sat directly across from Lori Vallow Daybell and didn't know a thing about the case. She was relatively new to Idaho when she moved in, and was picked for jury selection. Has 2 young boys, and it changed her life. It changed her life. I interviewed Laura last year, so an entire year after the trial, she actually came to court, and we met. We talked because in that first trial, I had made a request to interview jurors, and only one responded. And I interviewed him, Saul Hernandez. You can go watch that. And interviewed him at his home a couple days after the verdict came out, and then didn't hear from anybody else. And then a year later, when the verdict came out, or when Chad Daybell was in trial, Laura started to come with a couple of other jurors to the courthouse. And she agreed to do an interview at that time. I went over, we just sat down in her backyard, and you can go watch the entire thing. She was very raw, very open about it. Many of you really enjoyed that interview. And so I wanted to follow up with her. She actually came to the last trial a few weeks ago as well. She flew in here for a day or so, went in, and you'll hear her say it was even too much to be back in there, and she's not planning to come to this one. But my thanks to Laura. This kind of gives you an inside look as to what it's like being a juror on a high-profile case. All right, Laura, so here we are, final Lori Vallow Daybell trial. When you think back to 2 years ago right now, you guys had just reached a verdict as a jury in Lori's first case. What are your thoughts over the past 2 years? You came out to some of the trial last time, and here we are again now.
Yeah. Um, I was kind of just thinking about it as far as how I felt the summer after the trial. And I think it was a lot more traumatic the further I get from it, realizing how traumatic it actually was. Um, I think I functioned through the summer and I think I was better. When we talked before, I had gone through therapy and, you know, had done that, but it still took a lot of time to kind of fully get my energy back even. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but just I think my mind was still constantly processing it and trying to really understand what I had just been through. Um, and then even going to the trial a year ago for Chad's trial, again, I went through, after it was all over, another sort of grieving process because everybody was here and we were talking and being able to process. And then, like that, everybody was gone. So it was another sort of processing. And then going to Arizona, um, when was that? April?
Yeah.
Yeah. I It was only 2 days and I'm so glad I went, but it was so exhausting. I I I I can't come back. I can't do it again.
Why is that? Why do you think it was so exhausting? You mean seeing her, kind of reliving everything? Why is it?
I think so. I mean, I almost went back to therapy. I've actually contacted my counselor and I kind of was able to get through it on my own. But I think listening to her so defiant and spewing what I knew to be lies is really hard to sit and listen to and not be able to say anything and not, to just scream at her and be, so indignant. Like, you murdered your children and we already convicted you of that. And to act like, to say my daughter, Tylee, and she didn't talk much about JJ, but then saying my husband, and it was a lot to take in.
Yeah. Why did you want to come back?
To see all the family,
Mm.
I really have formed a bond with them, and I I am really glad I came when I did. I was there for Kay's testimony, which I was really grateful to be there and feel like I'm supporting her and to see. And we got to hang out for one evening while I was there. And so it was good to just sort of reconnect with them. But the trial part, I probably could have done without.
Right. Yeah. Not going to court. Uh,
Yeah.
are you in touch still with some of the jurors you served with 2 years ago?
Yeah, in fact, I stayed with Tom and Susan Evans while I was there. They had an Airbnb, so I just stayed with them. And there's others too that I've stayed in contact with.
Are they following the latest stuff? Do you know? I know Tom is,
Yes,
of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, to a certain extent, not probably even not as in depthly as I have been, but yes, they have.
Yeah. When you're sitting in the courtroom this last trial and looking at the jurors, you were in their seats just years ago, and you know so much more now than they did. What was going through your mind because for those that might not be familiar, they couldn't bring up any of the Idaho convictions. They couldn't bring up the fact that JJ was dead, that Tylee was dead, that Tammy Daybell, they don't even know who Tammy Daybell is. All this stuff that we know as the public, that you know as a juror. Uh, that was different in your case because you were kind of learning it. Well, I mean, the public knew that the children were dead and whatnot, but you were kind of learning as it went. What were your thoughts thinking about what those jurors were experiencing?
So during our trial, I kept thinking, there's always stuff in a trial that's not allowed to be admitted. And if it was, right away, you would go, they're guilty, knowing the entire story. And I kept thinking, because I wasn't convinced for a long time because I didn't know anything. And I feel like probably even 3 weeks still just trying to put everything together and making sure I understood the facts. And then you start to have a gut feeling, but is there what they need to prove to make her guilty? I wasn't sure. And so I just I felt bad for them because we didn't have that. We got to know everything. We got to know what happened in Arizona, even though it wasn't supposed to be used as evidence against her. They I felt really bad for them, and I felt really bad for how they were just let out afterwards. And we were so protected, and I am so grateful to the court system for protecting us, because it is traumatic. And I have briefly spoken to one of the jurors from that trial, and I just feel really bad for them. I mean, Arizona doesn't do, I think they did better at protecting the victims, and they didn't do as good protecting the jurors. And I feel really bad for them having to process all of this afterwards.
I wanted to ask you about that, the fact that the jurors in Idaho, the only time that we saw you as the media, as the public, is in the courtroom. Like
Yeah,
never again. And I remember chatting with you during a break one time when the jurors were walking like right by us.
I know.
What were the differences that you observed, and why do you say you kind of feel bad for them?
Well, I think they were ambushed, and I don't blame the media, because I did want to know, like, what they just found out. But I think the reason that I even agreed to do the first interview that we had is to explain to people how hard it is to actually be on that side, and to be nice to the jurors. And you don't always know what is going on. You don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know, what they have been through. And so to have all that media coming after them, and I think there's good actors and there's bad actors, right? And I'm glad that there are some of the good actors that actually got to interview them, um, and to get their story. I just wish they had a little time like we did to process it before being like,
Pounced. Yeah.
yeah,
But and just to let our audience know, what happened is we were told all the media was outside the courtroom. We were told someone from the courts came out and said none of the jurors want to talk to the media, like they want to go home. But then immediately after that person told us that, all of the jurors walked out to where we were all standing. Well,
right.
our job is we're going to say, okay, he told us this, but do you really want to talk? Rather
Yeah.
than walking them out a side door or a back door. And even the
Yes.
person that told us that was like, why did they bring him out this door without a guard, without an escort
Yep.
or anything? And
Yep.
then many of those jurors had to wait for the bus to go back to the
Right.
cars. So they're standing on a corner within feet of where the media are at. And it just kind of was a, you know, unusual situation. A few of them did
Yep.
talk there, and several others
Yep.
that I approached just kept walking. They did not want to talk. So,
Yeah.
but also you all had like meals brought in.
Yes.
You were in a secluded room from the public. I mean, it was very different than how the process is run here.
Yeah. In fact, when Tom and Susan and I were eating lunch downstairs in the cafeteria there was a juror sitting just, I mean, less than 10 feet away from us. And so we had to like kind of zip it, because I didn't want anything to happen. I mean, we all know how serious it is, that if you never want to have a mistrial, and you don't, one of our jurors who talked afterwards ended up at the sort of the same thing, where they wanted the case dismissed because of, even if it was something innocent, they're going to take anything that you say and twist it and try to get, you know, a mistrial.
Yeah.
So,
So what would your advice be to, I know the potential jurors are not watching this as far as the potential jurors in Brandon's case, but
right.
if you were able to give them some advice today, what would you say? Before the trial starts, as we get going next week, hopefully.
Um, I, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a process, but it's important. It's our civil duty, which I I didn't really grasp that before actually going through this process, everybody's like, oh, I have jury duty, it's like, and then like yesterday when those potential jurors were asked to come back on Monday, I would have been so frustrated. But then the system can't work unless we all participate in it. And so I would say that it's worth it in the end, that what you do it's noble, it's important, and she needs to be brought to justice for everybody. I know you get a lot of questions about why continue to go through the trials in Arizona, but Charles deserves the same respect as Brandon deserves in getting their justice.
And Brandon, has been there, and he'll continue to be there through the trial. Very good, Laura. Anything that you want to add? Are you going to follow this one?
Probably not closely. I'm trying to. It sucks you right back in, though. I'm like, no, I don't want to watch. And I've been so busy that I really just kept on whatever updates you've given. But wow, she puts on a show. I mean, it's something every single day that she does. And so, yeah, I probably not as closely as I have been.
Yeah.
Keep my sanity.
Right. Well, you can follow along the highlights, the key points. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for chatting with me. Anything you want to add?
Mad props to your wife. I know what it's like to have your husband gone a lot, and it's a lot to keep the fort down.
Yes, you have a husband who travels, and you know that well. So,
Yep.
yes, definitely props to her. Fortunately, hopefully, this trial won't be too long.
As long, and the kids are not in school, so that
right.
Lessens the load a little bit. But yeah.
Right. The kids are out of school. Well, our daughter at least is out of school. She had a 6th grade graduation, and I was able to go to it. It happened, it was on Tuesday. So here's a picture of us outside the school. Just have to get a little personal here. And then my little guy, Elliot, he and his brother Everett, they're in school this week. But look at this photo they sent us. They had the kindergartners pose in cap and gown. And he has kindergarten graduation on Thursday. And big shout out to my wife, Erica. As Laura mentioned there, she is holding everything down, and it is a busy time with school getting out and t-ball and cheerleading, all sorts of the activities and whatnot. And I'm thinking about you all, and I'm grateful for my family tonight. Here is how you can keep up to date. The trial is expected to begin tomorrow. I will be in the courtroom giving you live written updates beginning at 11:30 Mountain Time. That's 10:30 Arizona time. Every day you can go to eastidahonews.com or my X feed, and I'll be posting those live updates. Then the video from the trial will begin at noon Mountain, with the exception of tomorrow. I cannot give you a time of tomorrow when the video will start, but if you keep up to date on my socials, I'll be posting those, and I'll be sure to, let you know when that will start. And of course, tomorrow night, Courtroom Insider, and every night, live from Phoenix at 8 o'clock Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Phoenix time. Quick couple things before I get to your questions. The guilty shirt is apparently the hot one. Here, I'm going to move this. This says guilty of following East Idaho News. I wore this around Phoenix today, went to a couple places. It's funny the looks I get when they see it. One guy I went to a grocery store is like, guilty? I'm like, yeah, not of a crime, just following East Idaho News. Many of you purchased these over the weekend. We have a couple left, and our sale goes until 11:59 Mountain Time tonight. If you use the promo code PRETRIAL, 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 in our actual East Idaho News store, we will ship these out to you this week. So our team is going to personally ship these all out to you, and thank you for supporting us. Not only these shirts, but all of our other shirts. We appreciate your support. Also, a big shout out to newspapers.com. They are our sponsor this go round with this trial, and they have a fascinating archive of all sorts of news that you can imagine on newspapers.com, as well as true crime stuff. You want to look up a case, you want to really dive deep, which you remember a few a little while ago, I talked with Marsha Clark, the O.J. Simpson prosecutor, how she wrote her newest book, and she relied on old newspapers to kind of get because she was worried they didn't have an official court record of the case. Turns out they did. She was able to eventually get it, but she went back through old newspapers to read through what the news was publishing, it kind of the history of it all. And that's what newspapers.com does. They've got your historical, anything you can imagine. You can get lost for hours and hours in there. And guess what? They're giving you 20% off in the month of June for the Courtroom Insider audience. Isn't that nice? Newspapers.com, special discount, 20% off. Use the promo code NATE, N-A-T-E. That's it. That's all you got to do. Type in NATE at checkout. The clues to history's mysteries, I like that, are waiting for you on newspapers.com. We have a special shout out today. Peggy Jepson, our comment moderator. She is celebrating with her husband their 34th wedding anniversary today. Can you believe it? 34 years. I believe it's 34. It might be 36. Let me check. 30. It's over 30. 36. I gypped her 2 years. Can everybody wish Peggy a congratulations, and Glenn. Peggy and Glenn, they went for a ride today. She said there's an old road by Mesa Falls up in Ashton, if you know the area, and they just went on a ride. She says it's beautiful to heaven. And it's probably been there 1,000 years, and she's not going to tell me where it's at because she doesn't want people going there. But they went on a ride. Then she sent me this. I hope she doesn't mind. A couple hours later, she said, "What a disaster. Snow-covered roads set up our picnic to be hauled off by swarms of mosquitoes. So we came home and roasted hot dogs in our fire pit until the wind blew everything away." I cannot think of a more perfect celebration for a wedding anniversary than that. Isn't that life? Like, you have this perfectly planned thing, and then the mosquitoes come and you get washed away. Okay, here we go. We have some shout outs. Judy Scott, she's in Eugene, Oregon. May 31st was Brandon Kuhn's 40th birthday from South Carolina. Brandon, happy birthday. Hope you had a great day yesterday. And you watch every Insider. Well, good. Thank you. Betty Lester from Alexander, Arkansas. Sherry Renwand from Rexburg. Meg McCarroll from South Louisiana. Francis Mueller from Clarkston, Washington. Hi, Francis. Lynn McGar from Scotland. Very cool. Maria Knutson from Sweden. I love our international audience. Another one from Scotland. Kathleen Allen from Aberdeen, Scotland. Annie Welker from Florida. And Peggy and Glenn, she put her name on the list. I didn't even know that till now. Celebrating 36 of marital bliss. Well, mostly. LOL. Okay, questions. Here we go. Judy, if Lori is still sick next week, does court go on without her? Can one of her, quote, partners step in for her? I think that Rachel answered that question. It could go on without her. It could. In Lori's case, I don't foresee it going on without her. I think she will want to be there. And I think that I hope she's back tomorrow. We'll see. Marie, have they published any of the judges' responses? They had not as of Friday. But they probably will hit tomorrow. A lot of times they're filed and then it can take some time before they're put up. But I'm pretty much going to guarantee that Lori's requests were denied, but I'll for sure be able to report to you tomorrow. And if the trial continues as normal, we'll know that they likely were denied and that there weren't any major issues. Pam, what were you and Justin doing at the railroad? I saw Justin's post. So happy to see you guys hanging out. 2 favorite reporters on the story. Thank you, Pam. If you don't know what Pam's talking about, I guess I can show you the video. This was from Friday. Justin and I left court. What were we doing at the railroad? That's funny. And he needed a ride back to his station. Contrary to what you all might think, I tried to get along with and be cordial with all reporters, some better than others. That's kind of life.
I'm getting you in here for my Facebook. This is the type of day.
This is what the day's been like.
Justin needed a ride back to his station and he didn't have a car because he just walks down because his station's close. I have a car from Teton Toyota. but my parking spot is a bit of a walk from the courthouse. It was the cheapest parking spot I could find for the month versus my parking spot last trial was fairly close. So it's a bit of a walk. And I have to cross railroad tracks to get there. So we left the court. It was so hot. We were wondering what was going on with Lori being sick. It was like a weird day. And then we go to walk to the car, and originally that train was just stopped. We couldn't cross to get to our car, to get to the car. And then finally the train moved, so he shot that video. Anyway, good question, Pam. Thank you. What kind of illnesses do they quarantine people for in the jail? I'm not sure. We did reach out to the jail to see if they had any information, and we were directed to the health department, which didn't get back to us. A lot of times they're not going to give specific jail inmate conditions. The states are very private when it comes to that sort of stuff, and they're not going to say like so-and-so, because it could be a HIPAA violation. So-and-so has been diagnosed with whatever. Now, if there was a mass outbreak, like during COVID years, they would say there's been an outbreak and they're quarantined. So I think the judge was I don't know what type of illness she has, and I don't know what type of stuff they quarantine for, but if she's contagious, they would probably have to put her in a cell. She probably saw the nurse or the doctor there at the jail, and we'll see. Was Lori in court when the judge said Lori was sick? Yeah, she was right there. Warren says, Nate, you've been through thousands of trials. Is this emotionally taxing on you? I don't know if I've been through thousands, Warren. I've been through maybe dozens. Emotionally taxing. I'll tell you what, for me, the hardest one was the first one, Lori's first one. That was hard, seeing those images of JJ and hearing the awful details that we hadn't heard, and seeing Tylee and being in there daily. That was the hardest part. I went to therapy after that. I went and saw a counselor after that first trial. It was tough. This one, I wouldn't know if it's emotionally. There are emotional moments, but I'm just here to do my job, and mentally it does take a toll, and that's why I'm thankful for rainy days like today to just relax. Sarah, are they allowed to bring up the children's murders in this trial? They are not. They cannot bring up the Idaho cases in this one. Janet, how did you come up with the idea of Courtroom Insider, and then how did it all begin? Oh, good question, Janet. So this was done during that first trial. We really fought hard to get cameras in Lori's first trial. I wrote a letter to the judge, Judge Boyce. Media Coalition filed for access to have a camera in there. He said no, and then we asked for a live audio feed that we could bring you every day, and he said no. And then we thought, how are we going to cover this without video and without live audio? And so the court said, we'll make audio available at the end of every day, but you had to pay for it. And so we said, well, we'll request the audio every day, and we'll put that on our YouTube channel. But then during the day, during the trial, I'll post live updates on Twitter, on my Twitter account, as I'm in the courtroom, because he did allow laptops. And then we thought, well, if we're going to put it on Twitter, not everybody's on Twitter, on X, we might as well put it on our East Idaho News website, like a blog, a live blog. And that's what we did. And then I thought, well, I kind of like to, I come from a TV background, so I kind of like to tell people what's happening. So maybe every night from my hotel room, I'll just do a little live video with my phone and give people an update on what's happening. And then we decided to make it bigger than that and go like for 15 minutes and get a setup of everything and different computers. And so it started off as like 15 minutes, and then it went to 30 and then an hour. And sometimes we go over an hour. It just grew. So here we are. And yeah, that's how it came about. And then I think, I don't remember if it was Lori's or during Chad's, where so many of you would ask questions that Peggy, our comment moderator, and I'm like, I can't like stop and pause and gather all the questions. Could you gather them? And so she was brought in, and that's how we've been doing it ever since. And then we've turned it into a weekly thing when trials aren't happening, to talk about other crimes. So thank you for asking. Here's where you can find me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on X, Insta, and YouTube, East Idaho News. That is where you can find the video. That's where we will be the next few days and weeks. And I just have to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great week. We'll be back tomorrow night for Courtroom Insider. And of course, during the day, I'll let you know what's going to happen, if the trial is going on or if we have another sick day. And if we have another sick day, what should I do? That's the question. Let me know. All right, everybody, have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow.